Um, we are going through these halachos of. We're going through these halachos of truth telling and not truth telling, and we are talking about. We talked last week about the three things which a Talmid Chacham is allowed to change and embellish or debellish, as the case may be. Purio Ushpiza Masechta. And the first thing he discussed in the sefer Emes Knei was Masechta. Now, Puria, what's Puria? So Puria is, there are two different major interpretations. One interpretation is that if they ask you about things which are things of tznius, meaning when a person had relations with his wife or such like, when he's allowed to not say, excuse me, not say the truth. In other words, a person came late to shul, and it's because he was having relations with his wife. He doesn't have to say, I came to shul late because I had relations with my wife. He can say, I came to shul late because I wasn't feeling well, or something of that sort. Because in this case, the value of tznius overrides the value of emes. Again, if you lived in the city of Luz, it would not override the value of emes, but in the rest of the world, tznius comes first. There's some people say, the Maharsha, there in Bamitzia says that the Puria, you're allowed to lie about Puria. It refers not to Puria as in the bed, which is the Aramaic word for bed, but it refers to Puria as in Purim. A person of Talmid Chacham is allowed to fake being drunk on Purim. He doesn't have to be Yodsei the mitzvah literally. He can actually be Yodsei the mitzvah even by faking being drunk. So those are the two interpretations of Puria. Ushpiza, where Talmid Chacham also is allowed to not tell the truth, is if you were, if the Talmid Chacham was a guest by a balabayis, by a family which received him in a particularly nice manner, and he's among people and who are looking for people by whom they can spend time, and they're interested. Perhaps they'd be interested in jumping on the possibility of staying in a person's house if they knew that he was a nice guy and a good host. For example, if you have a Talmid Chacham who comes to collect money in America, and he finds a good house in which to stay, and he has fellow Rosh Yeshiva or Rosh Kollel or whatever else who also want to collect money in America, and they say to him, where'd you stay? So he's allowed to say that, it was not a great place to stay. Well, you don't want to know about it. So that is in order to save those hosts from having to deal with people who will then use up their welcome and use up the guy's money. But you certainly should not say something negative. In other words, you should say something about, well, it's okay, but not say negative. But you don't have to be positive. Because again, if you say something negative, already it becomes lashon hara. So don't be fully positive. Be kind of neutral. If you were a guest by Reuven, and your friend asks you where you were a guest, and you know that if you tell him that you were by Reuven, he's also going to be by Reuven. So you can say, I was by Shimon, or I was with somebody else, somebody you don't know. So in order not to create difficulties for Reuven. So again, this ushpiza literally means where a person slept. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It can mean anything having to do with hosting. So anything having to do with hosting, you don't have to tell the full truth in order to avoid burdening that host which you have. Some people say the exact opposite. That you're supposed to embellish the praise you lavish on your host, right? As long as it's something which is not going to cause him undue loss, because that's if you have a kind of gratitude to that person for having hosted you, so therefore you should be certainly be lavish in your praises. And certainly if his friend, a friend of yours, gave you some other benefit, again, you're allowed to diminish the praise if you know it's going to cause that person a loss. You're allowed to embellish the praise if you know that that's going to make the other person look good. Generally speaking, it's an important principle, which is that normal exaggerations are permitted. In other words, we have a principle which is used elsewhere. Dibra Torah K'Lashon Bnei Adam. Torah speaks like the people, but we also have a principle. Dibra Torah B'Lashon Havai. The Torah exaggerates. Where do we find that? We find that when the Torah says about that the Meraglim said that the cities of the Canaanim are in heaven. They stretch all the way up to the heavens. So that obviously was an exaggeration. We find that, as they say, Chazal spoke about exaggerations. When they said that something, generally when they use the number 300, it's an exaggeration. Like saying you needed 300 Kohanim to carry the paroches of the Beis HaMikdash. So we see in normal conversation, even in Torah, even in Chazal, I should say even Tanakh, because there are other examples of Tanakh, even Chazal, there are exaggerations built in to what's considered to be normal human give and take. So therefore, if it's understood, that person will sometimes lavish praise on people, even though they're not necessarily as praiseworthy as the praise seems. But that's okay, because that's how people relate to each other. And of course, very often, the person who hears the praise will discount the praise because he knows that people tend to exaggerate. But normal exaggerations are permitted in the course of human communication.
So how do we know when Chazal is employing?
Whenever Chazal use a round number and it sounds like a large number, they are exaggerating. According to Maharal, almost every number that Chazal use is a symbolic number, not an actual number. But I don't know if you have so when it says 60, 300, 400, those are generally exaggerations which are coming to impart a message as opposed to give an accurate number.
So what about things that aren't numbers?
It'll be the same thing. Do you have an agenda in your question?
No, not really. I'm just wondering how we know.
So we don't know. This is one of the things that people ask, how we know which midrashim to take literally, which not to take literally, which is something which you probably asked me in the past, and I've told you it's because it's a judgment call. You have to have a sense of it, and it's not easy. But generally speaking, numbers which seem to be unrealistic are unrealistic. That's the general principle. Okay. So some people say that if they asked a guest how his host conducted himself within his house, in other words, in matters of privacy, so the guy should basically say it's none of your business, right? You know, people don't want to know. People are not supposed to know necessarily how somebody conducts himself inside his house, and therefore, it's not something which you should tell other people. Let's say, for example, somebody asks you, Yankel, when he's home, he's a big Rosh Yeshiva, does he wear a t-shirt? Or does he wear a button-down shirt the whole time? So, you don't have to answer. You probably shouldn't answer. Because some people take it askance if Yankel wears a t-shirt. Some people might say, on the contrary, it shows that he's really into exercising, something like that. But generally speaking, you're allowed to say, and probably should say, it's none of the guy's business. Okay? He gives the Emes Knei gives a less dramatic example, similar thing. Somebody is a guest by the rabbi of the city, and goes and tells how the rabbi plays with the little kids inside the house. That might be denigrating to that person. May not, may yes. So everything has to do with where and when this is taking place. Okay, so now this is we're shifting a little bit gears here, talking about when one is allowed to change things in order to prevent other types of losses. So you're allowed to a person who has been stolen from, or his agent is allowed to lie in order to get back the stolen object. Now, this is a principle in Baba Kama. We have a principle, Ovid Inish Dilan Nafshe. A person can make a judgment for himself. It's a very dangerous thing, but very often Chazal realized there's not going to be any justice in the land. So therefore, if there's no proper authority who's going to help you out, you can go and make judgment for yourself. Take back your stolen object, collect money you're owed on your own initiative. And the Gemara says to the extent that you're allowed to beat somebody up to get back your money. So the Gemara says, since you're allowed to beat him up, you can also seize his assets. Because instead of compelling him to pay by hitting him, it's always better to compel him to pay by seizing assets. So this is also true in terms of being devious. Now, of course, a person has to be absolutely sure that this is the case, that they're being robbed in order to, or somehow cheated. But then a person is allowed to actually take the law to his hands to the extent of lying in order to get his money back. The Gemara, he says, all that is, of course, all that is outside of Beis Din. In Beis Din, one is not allowed to lie. But if you can't go to Beis Din, or Beis Din's not going to get involved, then you're allowed to lie to get your money back. But the question is, what happens in non-Jewish courts? Can you lie in a non-Jewish court? So some people say that you're allowed to lie in a non-Jewish court if you can't get your money back any other way, as long as there's no chashash of chilul Hashem, no suspicion of chilul Hashem coming out. And all this is in order to sustain a psak given by Beis Din or a din Torah that you're correct, in order to get that which is coming to you. But obviously, one can't take a false shivua in a regular court. It's not to take a false shivua if one is in danger of losing one's life. But one is not allowed to take a false shivua under other circumstances. And therefore, you can't take a false shivua even in a non-Jewish court. Okay.
Wait, so does no chashash mean you're assuming you won't get caught? Or...
Yeah, I don't know in practice how that applies. I really have no clue how it's going to be, how there's ever a possibility that how it's ever going to be definite that there's no chilul Hashem. But who knows? Maybe there's such a possibility. In such a case, theoretically, it'd be permissible to lie, as long as one is not taking a false oath. Yeah. So the next halacha, it's also permitted to lie in order to prevent other people to cause you loss. Before we tell you about after loss, it's also before the loss. Or some other type of mistreatment, maltreatment, which is not according to the halacha. And you're also allowed to, according to the Emes Knei, I'm going to read this word for word. The Chemesh Shanim, one is allowed to distort Kedeli Pater Mimisim V'Aronos, to get out of taxes and real estate tax. But he says it's only if you're actually exempt and they want to be mechayev you shelo kedin. Okay, so if you know in your heart of hearts that you should not be paying this tax, or real estate tax or personal tax, so then you're allowed to lie in order not to pay it. Now here brings up something which we discussed last week, and he says differently than I said. He says somebody was caught by the police because he broke a law, such as traffic law. He's not allowed to lie in order to get out of the penalty, because he's chayav in the penalty by dina de malchusa. And then he brings down in a parentheses a certain Talmud Chacham said to him that in Eretz Yisrael it should be different, because since there's an opinion in Eretz Yisrael that dina malchusa dina does not apply, the law of the land is not binding on you if it's not a Torah law. So then you should try and save as much money from their hands, from the hands of the dastardly government, in order that in order that they should not put their grubby hands on your holy money, and as long as it's not going to be chilul Hashem. I think that writing that paragraph in of itself is a chilul Hashem. So I don't know how acting on this paragraph would be any worse chilul Hashem than actually writing it. What I said last week, if you recall, is that I believe that you do not have to tell the absolute truth to a policeman because our entire system in America is based on Sheker because of the whole notion of plea deals, and I stand by that. In other words, if there's some way that you can have a ticket, there's no, the whole system is based on dishonesty. There's no reason why you have to be more honest than anybody else who's involved in it.
Sorry, I had asked you a while ago about, I'm not knowledgeable about this, but apparently someone told me that there are those that claim that all income tax in America is not applicable or something.
Yeah, it's nonsense. Of course it's applicable. They have to amend the Constitution in order to allow income tax. But once the Constitution was amended, it's the law of the land, and there's no way of getting out of it. Unless, according to the law of the land, the question is whether you have to declare everything. We know that many judges were denied. I know many. Some the judges were denied a place on the Supreme Court because they didn't declare the money they gave to their babysitters or to their cleaning ladies. So from this reason, they were not then brought to justice on that. They just lost their possibility to be on the Supreme Court. So so that type of thing is something, again, where there's no outright lie. You're just not divulging all the information, and most of the American system is based to a large extent on this not divulging use of illegal labor, and nobody's going to prosecute you for that. If they are, then it's awesome. But again, if you recall, we always go by what the standard is that they're going to prosecute, not what the actual letter of the law states. So therefore, things which people don't discuss or divulge under normal circumstances in the general public, you don't have to discuss or disclose either. There's a psak from Rabbi Sheker, which he says that one is not allowed to buy in a store which is not going to pay sales tax. Because if you go to a store and they don't charge you sales tax, it's also buying that store because of Dina the Malchus Dina. I don't think that that's the case. I think that, first of all, even the fact that they tell you you're not going to pay the sales tax doesn't mean you're not paying sales tax. That's what they're telling you in order to make you feel like you're getting a great deal. And besides that, there is evidently some threshold in America of people doing certain things off the books and certain things on the books. Now, a chassid who always does lifnei mishur sadin will probably do everything meticulously on the books. But it goes by what most Americans do, Jew and non-Jew, and what the government pursues, Jew and non-Jew. So therefore, if you have a case where a person feels that this is something which normally the government doesn't pursue, or something where he tells you there's no sales tax, but it's not necessarily true. So in that case, you're allowed to patronize that store. The next halacha here is that you're allowed to write on your property something like poison or fragile, or that it's property of the king, or it's truma, in order to prevent other people from stealing your property. Obviously the idea is that people will remove themselves from something which of a higher level of danger, and you're allowed to do that in order to prevent them from taking your stuff. Now again, I want to make this clear what I just said a few moments ago. This baseline halacha, a chassid will not lie in any way, shape, or form. But most of us in today's society are not capable of functioning, at least on a constant basis, at the level of chassidim. It doesn't work. So therefore, what we're talking about is pragmatic halacha, not lifnei mishur sadin. Okay. You're allowed, therefore, to trick a person who tricks you in order to be saved from his trickery. We see that from Yaakov Avinu, right? Yaakov Avinu told Rachel that Achiv ani bramus, if Laman tries to trick me, I'll trick him, right? So therefore, we see that you're allowed to tricky people. And you can also you can also try and pursue him in order to get him to come to court. You can by pursue I mean you can torment him in order to get him to come to court, not a non-Jewish court, of course, but to come to a Jewish court. So he gives this example. He says, Reuven, who owed Shimon $100, and Shimon said to Reuven, right, I'm going to sell you this object for $100, and Reuven gives the $100 to pay for it. Shimon could say, nah, the $100 that I got, I'm keeping for the money you owe me. If you want the object, give me another $100. So that way you're tricking the deadbeat into paying you for the object. And so this is true in any situation where, again, you're dealing with a person who is tricky and immoral, and you're trying to get your money back from him. The next case is a case where a person is being compelled to sell something against his will. So a person is allowed to tell witnesses before the sale, you should know this is under duress. I don't really mean to make the sale. And then afterwards, you can make the sale, and the sale is null and void. It's not a lie because he was under duress. So therefore, he was trying to get out of that. I mean, it's a lie, but it's permitted because he's remaining the sale under duress, and he's allowed to protect his property as much as possible. Yes. I can't hear very well. Can't hear. Do you want to write the question in the chat? Because I can't hear you. It's a lot of static. Okay, when it's typed, I'll respond to it. There's a Gemara B'Metzia which says, if you hired workers and they reneged on a job in the middle of the day, say that they were going to mow your lawn, and they reneged, so you can trick them to get back in the job. And you can say to them, you know what, I'm going to pay you more if you come back on the job. And then you only give them what you promised them originally, because they should not have stopped in the middle. So therefore, again, you are safeguarding yourself by this distortion, and it's not considered to be a case of Sheker. Okay, let's skip a bit here. Generally speaking, he says that you're allowed to I don't see your question yet. Can't read the question. 1 second. Oh, the case of Adim? I'm not sure what I said about Adim. I say something about Adim? You can't lie in court. I said that, but I'm not sure what I said about Adim. Adim can't lie. If they're coming as Adim, they have to tell the truth, no matter what. But you're allowed to, generally speaking, you're allowed to lie in order to prevent other people from doing something which is prohibited, and you're allowed to lie in order to keep the peace or for some other benefit which is permissible, and you're allowed to lie in order to get a mitzvah done, even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So all these things are all these things are l'tzorech mitzvah, but not where there's money involved. And therefore, he brings down here from Rav Moshe Feinstein, from Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, you're not allowed to expand the number of talmidim you have in your yeshiva in order to get more federal or state funds. You can't pretend you have more people than you actually have, or you can't praise your yeshiva more than is appropriate in order to get more money from the government or from any other benefactors. So if you say, you have, let's a hypothetical case, purely hypothetical. Let's say you have a Baal Tshuva yeshiva, and it's a lie because you have no Baal Tshuva yeshiva. So then, even if it's a regular yeshiva, it's still a lie. You can't collect money on those premises because the person is giving specifically because you told them what type of thing it is, and it's a monetary loss. Okay, so the monetary loss means when they want to give to something, and you give the impression of something else. You can't, and again, you say you can't even give the government a monetary loss because they'll only give you for the number of students. And unfortunately, many rabbis have gone to jail for this avera over the course of the years. The person is allowed to conceal their good deeds, and that means they're supposed. So, example, a person is accepts upon himself a personal tinus, right? So then he's allowed to lie and say he didn't accept upon himself a tinus, because that would be something which might cause them to be arrogant or haughty, and therefore his own midos, in that case, he's allowed to lie and say that, no, I didn't accept upon myself a tinus. Okay, now this is now we're talking about lying in order to prevent something bad or dangerous to happen. So we know from Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu told Esav, "I'm going to be following you. I'm going to come to Seir right behind you, just a little bit slower." And Yaakov never went. So we see from this, one is allowed to lie in order if one senses danger is involved in pursuing that avenue and not saying a lie. So from here we see that a person who is in a situation of danger is allowed to say something to prevent that danger from taking place. Same thing if somebody asks you where you're going to sleep and you're afraid that they're going to use it in order to rob you or murder you, so then you're allowed to tell them a different place. I think we mentioned this already, that about concealing from a sick patient the extent of his disease, and we're afraid to tell him that because it might make him worse, it might give up hope. So here he says, interesting thing, he says, Yasser Shelas Chacham. Should ask a Rav what to do. Which I don't really understand. I guess you're asking the Rav what's better in this case, to tell him or not to tell him. But certainly it would be mutter to not tell him the truth. The possibility, the flip side is only if he's really dying and he's not going to be able to say vidui, unless he's not going to be able to confess his sins on his deathbed. So then, of course, there's a tzad to say don't lie to him in order that he can properly prepare for death. But it's certainly on the flip side, he said, you're allowed to lie to a person in order to make sure that he follows the recommendation or takes the prescription which you're prescribing for him. Or you're allowed to frighten the person to think he's sicker than he is. Because then he'll be frightened to follow the course of treatment which you're prescribing for him. And this is a very famous Gemara. Because Bavli Yani Yerushalmi, Rabbi Yochanan was once sick, and it was Erev Shabbos. He went to a certain woman doctor, a non-Jewish woman doctor, and who made him a medicine. And he said, "What's going to happen if I need it tomorrow?" So the the woman said, you won't need it. So he said, well, what if I do need it? So she said, I can't tell you. So she said, Rabbi Yochanan took an oath and said, I'm not going to, to the God of Israel, I'm not going to reveal whatever you tell me. So the woman took the oath seriously, and she told him the medication. The next day, Rabbi Yochanan got up in shul, it was Shabbos, and in his sermon, his drasha, he gave everybody the prescription for the medicine in public, right? So obviously the Gemara has a question, what about the Chilul Hashem which was involved? Because he made a promise. So first of all, they say it wasn't a real promise, because what he said in a very sly way. He said, I'm not going to reveal it to the God of Israel. I'm going to reveal it to other people. To the God of Israel, I will not reveal it. But the other people are going to reveal the medication. Also, the Taisa says that immediately after getting the prescription, he told the woman, tomorrow I'm going to say it over in shul. And what I told you was a deceit in order to be able to get the medical prescription out of you. Now, I'm not sure what we do with this Bisman Hazeh, because Bisman Hazeh, certainly the development of medications is contingent on profit motive. Maybe it was back then, but I don't think to the same extent. So, but at that time, it was considered to be usher to patent the medicine. Any medicine and medication which developed was supposed to be available to the masses, and that's why he told it to everybody else. You were not allowed to keep the secret of a medication to yourself because it could save people. Anything which could save people had to be distributed and known by everybody. On the other hand, he says a Jew can't say he's a goy in order to prevent himself being killed. That is Yehoreg Val Yavor, to say that you're not Jewish. The Rambam says that's why you can't say that you're a Muslim, even though the Muslims are not of the Avodah Zarah, because denying you're Jewish is a form of heresy, which a person is not allowed to commit, even though it means that you're not committing Avodah Zarah. It's just the very fact that you're going to say, I'm not Jewish, or I'm Muslim, or something of that sort, is forbidden. Why is that? Because other people, it's going to, which man is Chilul Hashem, and one has to die of Chilul Hashem. Other people say that he must have given up their religion. And so therefore, you have to give up your life for that. Now, the Rambam Igeres Taimon says that if a person did it, right, it's not punishable by death. In other words, the Rambam was writing Igeres Taimon to people who had said they were Muslims, his letter to Yemen. People had to say they were Muslims in order to save themselves from death. And although the Rambam says you're not supposed to do it,